The emergency alarm echoed through the massive space station floating above. Centauri Prime? Ambassador Kethra hurried down the gleaming corridor, her blue skin pale with worry. She had never seen the Galactic Council call such an urgent meeting before. In her 300 years of diplomatic service, nothing had ever threatened the peaceful alliance of 12 species that ruled this part of the galaxy. The council chamber was already full when she arrived, representatives from all the member worlds sat in their designated sections, speaking in hushed tones. The air recyclers worked overtime to handle the different atmospheric needs of so many species. Kethra took her place among the other Villani delegates and looked around the room. The Quillen representatives looked exhausted. Their feathers were dull, and many had stress marks around their large eyes. The crystal beings from Zarian flickered. With nervous energy, even the proud Threnody, who usually held themselves above such displays of emotion, seemed on edge. High Chancellor Vexerin called the meeting to order. His species, the ancient Corvani, had led the council for over 1,000 years. Today, even his usual calm demeanor cracked as he began to speak. "Fellow beings of the council," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber, "we face the greatest threat in our recorded history. The Vorthok Empire has awakened." Collective gasp filled the room. Kethra felt her heart skip a beat. Every child in council space knew the old stories about the Vorthok. They were the nightmare species that consumed everything in their path, turning living worlds into twisted biomechanical hives. But those were just legends, stories told to explain ancient ruins and dead systems. 3 days ago, the Chancellor continued, we lost contact with the Outer Rim colonies of the Helix Nebula. Our scout ships found nothing but empty space where thriving worlds once existed. The planets themselves had been stripped down to their cores. Images appeared on the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Kethra watched in horror as the recordings showed massive organic ships, their hulls pulsing with veins and biomechanical ports. The creatures looked like a fusion of living tissue and advanced technology, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The Vorthok bioships are unlike anything we have faced, Chancellor Vexerin explained. They adapt to our weapons in real time. Our energy blasts feed their shields. Our missile attacks are absorbed and converted into raw materials for more ships. Every battle only makes them stronger. Admiral Quinter of the Quillen Defense Fleet stood up. His species were natural pilots. With hollow bones and excellent reflexes, evolved for flying through their homeworld's thick atmosphere. If anyone could fight these invaders, it should be the Quillen. We have lost 17 fleets in the past week, the Admiral reported, his voice heavy with grief. Each engagement taught us the same lesson. Conventional warfare is useless against them. They learn from every attack and counter it within hours. Kethra watched her fellow diplomats shift uncomfortably. The council species had enjoyed peace for centuries. They had evolved on gentle worlds with mild climates and abundant resources. War was something they studied in history books, not something they were prepared to fight. "What about the emergency protocols?" asked Minister Jelani. "Of the crystal beings." Her crystalline form rang like a bell as she spoke. "Surely our combined fleets can mount some defense. The protocols assume we are fighting another council-level civilization," Admiral Quinter replied. "The Vorthok do not follow the rules of civilized warfare. They do not seek territory or resources in any way we understand. They simply consume everything and move on to the next system." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Kethra looked around at her fellow diplomats and saw the same fear she felt reflected in their faces. These were species that had built a civilization based on cooperation and mutual benefit. None of them knew how to fight an enemy that wanted nothing but their complete destruction. Chancellor Vexeron cleared his throat. "There is one option we have not yet explored. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected several unknown civilizations beyond our current borders. Perhaps one of them might be willing and able to help us. Contact unknown aliens." Minister Jelani's crystalline form flickered with alarm. "It violates every first contact protocol we have established. The protocols assume we have time for proper diplomatic procedures," the Chancellor replied grimly. "At current rates of expansion, the The Vorthok will reach our core worlds within 6 months. We need help now, not after years of careful negotiation. Ambassador. Kethra found herself standing before she realized she had made the decision to speak. What kind of help are we expecting from species we know nothing about? Our own advanced civilizations cannot stop these creatures. What makes us think strangers will do better? Because Admiral Quinter said quietly. We need someone who thinks differently than we do. Someone who has faced impossible threats before and survived. The Admiral activated another holographic display. This one showed star charts marking the locations of unknown signals detected by their monitoring stations. Most were weak transmissions that could be anything from natural phenomena to primitive radio broadcasts. But 3 stood out as clearly: artificial and highly advanced. These 3 sources show technological signatures we do not recognize, the Admiral explained. Energy patterns and construction methods completely unlike our own. If they have survived long enough to develop interstellar technology, they must have dealt with serious challenges. Kethra studied the star charts. The 3 unknown civilizations were scattered across different regions of space, each far from Council territory. The closest one would take weeks to reach, even with their fastest ships. I volunteer to make contact with the nearest source, she heard herself saying. The words surprised her, but once spoken, she felt certain of her choice. My species has the most experience with first contact situations, the Chancellor nodded slowly. Very well. I take the fastest ship we have and a minimal crew. Send messages to all 3 locations explaining our situation and asking for help. Offer whatever payment or trade agreements they might want. And if they refuse, Kethra asked. The Chancellor's expression grew darker. And we evacuate what civilians we can to the far rim and prepare for the end of our civilization. 2 hours later, Kethra stood on the bridge of the courier ship, Harmony's voice as it prepared to jump to hyperspace. Her small crew consisted of only essential personnel: a pilot, engineer, a communications specialist, and 2 guards for protection. The ship itself was built for speed, not combat. If they encountered the Vorthok, running would be their only option. Course-laden ambassador, reported the pilot. Jumped to hyperspace in 30 seconds. Kethra looked out the viewports at the stars surrounding Centauri Prime. Somewhere out there, an unknown species might hold the key to their survival. Or they might find nothing but another primitive civilization that would be as helpless as the Council against the Vorthok swarms. Make the jump, she ordered. The stars stretched into lines as hyperspace embraced their small ship. Behind them, the Council began evacuating their outer colonies and preparing their remaining fleets for a hopeless last stand. Ahead lay the unknown, and perhaps their only chance for survival, in the depths of space. The Vorthok Queen Mind Zethera sensed the Council's growing desperation through her biomechanical networks. The taste of fear made her hunger grow stronger. Soon, she would feast on 12 entire civilizations, and their combined biological mass would fuel her expansion into new regions of the galaxy. The hunt was almost over. The feast was about to begin. Captain Jake Morrison floated in the observation deck of the UES Defiant, watching the stars drift by through the massive viewport. His ship was humanity's first real attempt at deep space exploration, built with the best technology Earth could manage. After decades of preparation, a crew of 200 had been out here for 8 months, mapping star systems and looking for signs of other intelligent life. So far, they had found plenty of planets, but no aliens. Jake was starting to wonder if humanity was truly alone in this part of the galaxy when the communications officer called from the bridge. Captain, we're picking up something unusual, Lieutenant Ben Parker reported over the intercom. It's definitely artificial, but unlike anything in our databases. Jake pushed off from the viewport and floated through the corridors to the bridge. The Defiant used rotating sections for artificial gravity in most areas, but the command center remained in zero gravity to give the crew better spatial awareness during complex maneuvers. Dr. Lisa Grant was already there, hunched over her workstation with excitement written across her face. As the ship's xenobiologist, she had been hoping for this moment since the mission began. Her computer screen showed wave patterns and mathematical sequences that clearly indicated intelligent origin. What do you have, Lisa? Jake asked, settling into his command chair. It's a message, Captain, she said, barely able to contain her enthusiasm. multiple frequency bands, highly sophisticated encoding, and mathematical proofs that show the senders understand advanced physics. This is definitely from an alien civilization. Commander Alex Hayes, the ship's second-in-command, looked less excited and more worried. "Captain, regulations require us to report any contact with alien species immediately to Earth Command. We should not respond until we receive orders. That would take 6 months for the message to reach Earth and 6 months for orders to come back," Jake replied. By then, whoever sent this might have given up waiting for an answer. Lieutenant Ben Parker was working at the communications station, running the alien message through every translation program they had. "Captain, I think I've got something. The message includes basic mathematics and physics constants, like they're trying to teach us their language. But there's something else here too." He put the partially decoded message on the main screen. Even with most of it still scrambled, certain concepts came through clearly. Help, danger, death, many worlds. Please respond. "They're asking for help," Dr. Grant said quietly. "This isn't just a greeting, it's a distress call." Jake stared at the message, feeling the weight of the moment. Humanity had dreamed of meeting aliens for centuries. Now that it was happening, the first contact wasn't a peaceful exchange of knowledge, but a cry for help from beings in terrible danger. "Commander Hayes, what's our current position?" Jake asked. "We're 3 weeks from the coordinates included. In the message, Captain, it's in the Kepler 442 system." Jake made his decision. Set course for those coordinates. "Dr. Grant, keep working on translating the message. I want to know everything we can about what we're flying into." Captain Hayes said carefully, "Are you sure about this? We don't know anything about these aliens. They could be dangerous. This could be a trap." "It could be," Jake agreed. "But if someone is asking for help, and we're the only ones who can provide it, then we have a duty to try." 3 weeks later, the Defiant dropped out of hyperspace near a small moon orbiting the 4th planet of the Kepler 442 system. Immediately, their sensors detected an alien vessel waiting for them. Jake had expected something strange, but the reality still took his breath away. The alien ship looked like it was made of living crystal, its surface shifting between different colors as it moved. It was beautiful and completely unlike anything human engineers had ever imagined. The ship was also much smaller than the Defiant, clearly not built for war. "They're hailing us," Ben Parker reported, using the same mathematical language from their original message. "Put them through," Jake ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of the alien vessel. 3 beings stood in what appeared to be their command center, and Jake felt his worldview expand in an instant. The aliens were tall and slender, with blue skin that seemed to shimmer with its own light. They had large eyes and graceful movements that suggested they had evolved in a low-gravity environment. The central figure stepped forward and began to speak. The translation program turned her musical language into hesitant English. "Greetings, unknown beings. I am Ambassador Kethra of the Villani species, speaking for the Galactic Council. We sent messages asking for help because our civilization faces extinction. We did not expect anyone to respond." Jake stood up from his command chair, suddenly aware that he was making history. "Ambassador Kethra, I am Captain Jake Morrison. Of Earth, we received your message and came to see if we could help. What kind of danger are you facing?" The alien's expression changed to something that looked like surprise. "Earth, you are from a single world? We assumed any species capable of interstellar travel would control multiple systems." Dr. Lisa Grant stepped forward, unable to contain her excitement. "We are new to space travel. Earth is our home world, and we have only recently developed the technology to travel between stars." Ambassador Kethra exchanged glances with her companions. "May I ask what classification of world Earth is? This will help us understand your capabilities." Lisa looked confused. "Classification? I'm not sure what you mean." "The environmental rating of your homeworld," Kethra explained. "Most civilized species evolved on Class 1 through Class 3 worlds. Gentle climates, stable weather patterns, abundant resources, minimal predatory species. What class is Earth?" Jake saw Lisa's face go pale as she realized the implications of the question. "Ambassador, By your scale, Earth would probably be classified much higher. We have extreme weather systems, active volcanic regions, frequent natural disasters, and many species evolve specifically to hunt and kill other creatures. The aliens on the screen visibly stepped backward. One of them spoke rapidly in their own language, and Jake's translation program picked up words like impossible and Deathworld species. You evolved on a Class 12 world? Kethra asked, her voice filled with disbelief. That is not possible. No intelligent species can develop on worlds with such hostile conditions. Well, we did, Jake said simply, and we survived by learning to adapt, to fight when necessary, and to work together against threats that were bigger and stronger than we were. Commander Alex Hayes chose that moment to join the conversation. Ambassador, what exactly is threatening? Your civilization? You mentioned extinction in your message? Kethra's expression grew grim. She activated a holographic display that showed recordings of massive organic ships attacking defenseless planets. Gut. Jake watched in horror as entire worlds were stripped of life, their populations consumed by creatures that looked like a nightmare fusion of biology and technology. These are the Vorthok, Kethra explained. They appeared 6 weeks ago in our outer territories. Every fleet we send against them is destroyed or absorbed into their biomechanical collective. They do not seek conquests or resources as we understand. They simply consume everything and move on to the next system. Jake studied the recordings with a tactical eye that had been trained through years of Earth's military academies. He saw immediately what the peaceful aliens had missed. Their ships are organic, he observed. That means they need to maintain biological functions. They have to eat, they have to process waste, and they have structural weaknesses that inorganic ships don't have. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Clark, the Defiance Marine commander, appeared on the bridge just in time to see the recordings. Captain, those formations are designed for intimidation, not tactical efficiency. They're spread too wide with gaps that a fast strike force could exploit. The aliens stared at the human officers in amazement, where they saw unstoppable monsters. The humans saw problems to be solved and enemies to be defeated. You would fight them, Kethra asked in disbelief. Even after seeing what they did to our worlds. Jake looked around at his crew and saw the same determination reflected in every face. These were people whose species had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain by refusing to give up when faced with impossible odds. If you want our help, you'll have it. But we do this our way. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the command center of the UES Retribution, watching dozens of ships prepare for humanity's first interstellar war. 3 weeks had passed since Captain Morrison's message reached Earth, and the response had been swift and overwhelming. Every nation on Earth had contributed ships, weapons, personnel to what the media was calling the Human Expeditionary Fleet. The fleet looked nothing like the elegant vessels of the Galactic Council. Human ships were built for function over beauty, with thick armor plating, multiple weapon systems, and the kind of redundant systems needed to survive in hostile environments. Many were converted civilian vessels. Mining ships became missile platforms. Cargo haulers were fitted with railguns. Even passenger liners had been turned into troop transports. Admiral, all ships report ready, said Commander Tony Walsh, the fleet's chief engineer. We have 47 combat vessels, 23 support ships, and enough firepower to level a small moon. Kate nodded, studying the tactical display. The plan was simple, but risky. Intelligence from the Galactic Council indicated that a large Vorthok harvester fleet was processing the remains of the Quillen homeworld in the Altair system. The aliens there had been peaceful merchants and traders, with no military capability worth mentioning. Their entire planet had been consumed in less than 2 days. What's our ETA to Altair? Kate asked. 6 hours at maximum hyperspace velocity, replied Navigation Officer Lisa Foster. The Council ships will meet us at the jump point. Kate had mixed feelings about their alien allies. Ambassador Kethra and her people were brave enough, but they had no experience with real warfare. Their ships were fast and well-designed, but built for exploration and diplomacy. The Quillen vessels were even worse, clearly intended for cargo transport rather than combat. Admiral called communications specialist Ben Rodriguez were receiving a message from Captain Morrison on the Defiant. He says the council representatives want to discuss battle strategy. Kate sighed. She had been expecting this. The aliens still didn't understand how different human warfare was from their peaceful negotiations. Tell Captain Morrison we'll meet with them once we reach the staging area. Right now, I want all department heads to review the attack plan one more time. The holographic display showed the Altair system as the council scouts had found it. A thriving world had once existed. There was now a writhing mass of organic ships, some as large as cities. The Vorthok had built a temporary hive around the planet's remains. Processing the biological material they had harvested, Colonel Pete Adams, commander of the Marine Forces, studied the enemy positions with professional interest. Admiral Doe's formations are designed to protect the harvester ships in the center, but they're assuming attacks from specific directions. If we hit them from above and below the orbital plane simultaneously, we can bypass most of their defenses. Major Kelly Brooks, his second-in-command, pointed to several smaller targets. Those look like communication nodes. Take them out first, and the hive mind might lose coordination between their ships. Kate was impressed by how quickly her officers had adapted to fighting an entirely new kind of enemy. Humans had been preparing for war their entire evolutionary history. Faced with biomechanical aliens, they simply applied the same principles that had worked against every other threat Earth had ever produced. 6 hours later, the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Altair system. The Council ships were already waiting, their crystalline hulls reflecting the light from the system's twin stars. Kate watched the tactical display as her sensors detected the massive Vorthok presence around the dead planet. "My God," whispered Dr. Nina Foster, the fleet's xenobiologist. "There must be thousands of them." The enemy ships moved in organic patterns, flowing around each other like schools of fish. Their hulls pulsed with veins and biomechanical systems. Many were actively growing new sections as they processed harvested material. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Admiral Sullivan, came Ambassador Kethra's voiceover. "The communications channel. We must discuss our approach. The Vorthok will detect us soon, and their response will be overwhelming." Kate activated the fleet-wide communication system. "All Council vessels, this is Admiral Sullivan. Move to safe distance and observe. Do not engage the enemy unless specifically ordered." Admiral Kethra protested. "You cannot face this threat alone. We must coordinate our attacks." "Ambassador, with respect, your people don't know how to fight this kind of war. Stay back and let us show you how Deathworlders handle apex predators." Kate turned to her tactical officer. "Commander Clark, initiate attack pattern Delta 7. All ships, weapons free." The human fleet split into 3 groups, approaching the Vorthok hive from different vectors. The first group, led by the converted mining ship UES Hammer, began the attack by launching a spread of nuclear-tipped missiles. The aliens watching from a safe distance gasped as the humans used weapons that the Council had banned centuries ago as too destructive. The Vorthok bioships reacted quickly, their organic hulls adapting to absorb the nuclear explosions' energy. Shields formed from living tissue, and the fleet began moving to intercept the human attackers. For a moment, it looked like the same pattern that had destroyed every Council fleet. Then, the second wave of human ships arrived from below the orbital plane. Captain Jake Morrison's upgraded Defiant led the charge, its railguns firing solid metal projectiles at incredible velocities. The kinetic weapons punched through biomechanical hulls that were designed to absorb energy, leaving gaping holes that leaked atmosphere and organic fluids into space. "Target those communication nodes," Morrison ordered over the fleet channel. "Cut off their ability to coordinate." The third human group, consisting of the heaviest ships, emerged from hyperspace, directly above the Vorthok formation. Admiral Sullivan's Retribution led this final assault, its massive weapons systems opening fire with everything humanity could bring to bear. The battle became chaos as hundreds of ships maneuvered in 3-dimensional space. The Vorthok quickly realized they were facing something completely different from the peaceful Council species. Human ships rammed damaged enemy vessels, using their thick armor to crush organic holes. Fighters launched from carrier ships engaged the smaller Vorthok units in dogfights that looked more like aerial combat from Earth's atmosphere. Staff. Sergeant Carl Lewis became a legend that day when his transport ship was boarded by Vorthok. Biomechanical warriors. Instead of retreating, Lewis and his Marine squad fought the creatures hand-to-hand in the ship's corridors. Using combat techniques developed for fighting Earth's most dangerous predators, the sight of humans in powered armor wrestling with alien monsters was broadcast across the fleet. Inspiring cheers from human crews and stunned silence from their alien allies, the turning point came when Dr. Nina Foster's experimental biodisruption weapon was deployed. Working with data from the Council's previous encounters, she had developed a device that interfered with the organic control systems of Vorthok's ships. When the weapon was activated, dozens of enemy vessels suddenly lost coordination, their biomechanical systems fighting against each other. "It's working," Foster reported excitedly. "The disruption field is causing their organic computers to malfunction. They can't maintain formation." Admiral Sullivan seized the opportunity. "All ships concentrate fire on the harvester vessels. End this now." The final phase of the battle lasted only minutes. Their coordination disrupted and their formations broken. The Vorthok fleet was systematically destroyed by human weapons designed for maximum destructive efficiency. The few surviving bioships attempted to flee the system, but human pursuit vessels followed them into hyperspace. When the shooting stopped, the space around Altair was filled with drifting debris and the scattered remains of what had once been a thriving Vorthok harvester operation. The human fleet had suffered casualties, but they had won a victory that the peaceful Council species had thought impossible. "Admiral Sullivan," came Ambassador Kethra's voice, filled with awe and something that might have been fear. "How did you do that? We have never seen the Vorthok defeated so completely." Kate looked at the tactical display showing the aftermath of humanity's first interstellar battle. "Ambassador, we did what humans have always done when faced with a superior predator. We adapted, we worked together, and we hit back harder than they expected." In the depths of space, the Vorthok Queen Minzathera felt the destruction of her harvester fleet like a physical blow. For the first time in 10,000 years, she had encountered prey that fought back effectively. The taste of defeat was bitter and strange, but it also brought something she had not felt in millennia: genuine interest in her opponents. 3 months after the victory at Altair, the war had spread across 17 star systems. The Vorthok Queen Mind had responded to humanity's challenge by accelerating her expansion, sending larger and more adaptable biofleets to test these new enemies. What she found surprised her. Every time her forces evolved new defenses, the humans countered with entirely different weapons. Captain Zoe Mitchell floated in the zero-gravity section of her ship, UES Vengeance, studying the latest intelligence. Reports the Vorthok had learned from their defeat at Altair. Their new bioships were faster, more heavily armored, and equipped with weapons that could punch through human shields. The easy victories of the first few battles were becoming distant memories. "Captain," called her communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Johnson. "Admiral Sullivan wants to speak with all ship commanders. Priority Alpha." Zoe pushed off from the wall and drifted toward the command center. Around her, the ship hummed with the activity of a crew that had been fighting non-stop for weeks. The Vengeance was one of humanity's newer ships, built specifically for this war with lessons learned from each previous battle. The holographic display showed Admiral Sullivan's tired face from the bridge of the Retribution. Behind her, Zoe could see damage reports scrolling across multiple screens. The human fleet was winning battles, but the cost was getting higher each time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Sullivan began, "we've received word from Earth Command. The Vorthok have begun attacking Council worlds directly. The Threnody homeworld fell yesterday. 3 billion people consumed in 18 hours. The silence on the communication channel was heavy. Zoe felt the familiar weight of responsibility that came with being humanity's shield against the darkness. Every day they spent fighting meant more innocent people lived. Every mistake meant entire civilizations died. Our xenobiology teams have Made a breakthrough, the Admiral continued. Dr. Sam Wright appeared on the screen next to her, looking exhausted but excited. Dr. Wright, please brief the fleet commanders. Wright activated his own display, showing complex biological diagrams. We've discovered that the Vorthok hive mind depends on quantum entanglement networks spread throughout their bioships. But there's something else. The individual creatures show signs of independent thought when separated from the collective. What does that mean for us tactically? Asked Colonel Ryan Clark from his ship, the UES Hammer. It means we might not need to kill them all, Wright replied. If we can sever the connection between individual Vorthok and their queen mind, they become autonomous beings. Some of our prisoners have actually tried to communicate with us. Captain Jake Morrison's voice came over the channel from the Defiant. Are you telling us that the Vorthok are slaves to this queen mind? That they might be victims too? That appears to be the case, Wright confirmed. The original Vorthok species was conquered by their own biological weapon 10,000 years ago. What we're fighting is essentially a galaxy-wide infection. Zoe absorbed this information with mixed feelings. It was easier to fight monsters than to fight victims of mind control. But it also offered possibilities that pure destruction did. Not Admiral, she said. What are our new orders? We continue the fight, Sullivan replied grimly. But now we have two objectives. Protect the innocent and find a way to free the Vorthok from their own nightmare. The next phase of the war tested humanity in ways they had never experienced. The Vorthok queen mind, realizing that her enemies were adapting faster than she could counter, began using psychological warfare. Bioships would broadcast recordings of consumed populations, showing Council civilians calling for help as they were absorbed into the collective. Dr. Helen Cruz, a reformed weapons designer, who had joined the fleet as a psychological warfare specialist, worked with her team to counter these attacks. We need to turn their own tactics against them, she explained to Captain Mitchell during a briefing. The Queen Mind uses fear as a weapon, but fear works both ways. Her solution was both brilliant and disturbing. Human ships began broadcasting recordings of laughter, music, and children playing across Vorthok communication networks, to a hive mind that had known only hunger and conquest for millennia. The sounds of joy and individual expression were completely alien and deeply disturbing. It's working, reported Dr. Sam right after the first test. Vorthok ships exposed to human emotional broadcasts show decreased coordination and response times. It's like we're giving them psychological indigestion, but the humans' greatest. Strength was also becoming their greatest problem. Council species, who had initially celebrated humanity as their saviors, were beginning to fear their rescuers almost as much as the Vorthok. Ambassador Kethra arrived at the human fleet. Headquarters aboard the converted space station New Geneva, 3 weeks after the Threnody homeworld fell. She had requested a private meeting with Admiral Sullivan, and the tension in her manner was obvious. Admiral Kethra began carefully. The Council has asked me to discuss certain concerns about human military methods. Sullivan looked up from her tactical displays, noting the barely concealed fear in the alien diplomat's posture. What kind of concerns? Your people fight with an intensity that frightens us, Kethra admitted. Yesterday, Captain Morrison's crew boarded a damaged Vorthok bioship and fought those creatures with their bare hands in the corridors. The recordings show humans laughing while engaged in mortal combat. That's how we process stress, Sullivan explained patiently. Humans have always used humor to deal with fear and danger, but it appears to us that your people enjoy the violence, Kethra pressed. Some council members are asking whether we have simply traded one threat for another. Admiral Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, studying the alien diplomat.
Yes,
Was the conversation she had been dreading since the war began? How do you explain to peaceful beings that sometimes violence is not only necessary, but must be embraced completely to be effective? Ambassador, she said finally, let me show you something. Sullivan activated a holographic display showing the latest battle reports. In the past month, we've saved 14 billion Council civilians from Vorthok harvester fleets. We've lost 8,000 human personnel doing it. Every one of those people volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never see Earth again. She changed the display to show casualty reports. Captain Morrison, who you say laughs while fighting, has personally rescued over 3 million Quillen refugees. Staff Sergeant Carl Lewis, who terrifies your people with his combat enthusiasm, spent his shore leave helping rebuild a Threnody colony ship. Kethra listened in silence as Sullivan continued. We fight with intensity because anything less means people die. We laugh in the face of death because the alternative is despair. And yes, some of us enjoy the challenge of combat because we evolved from predators. But we chose to use that strength to protect instead of conquer. The alien diplomat's expression softened slightly. I understand the logic, Admiral. But surely you can see why peaceful species might find your methods disturbing. I can, Sullivan admitted. And that's a problem we'll have to face when this war is over. But right now, the only thing standing between the Vorthok and the complete extinction of Council civilization is human willingness to be more dangerous than our enemies. The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the communications center. Lieutenant Commander Grace Roberts burst into the room, her face pale with urgency. Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from the Zarian system. The Vorthok have deployed something new. Our scouts report bioships the size of small moons, and they're not just harvesting the population. They're building something, Sullivan. And Kethra rushed to the command center where the main display showed long-range sensor data from the Zarian system. The images were grainy, but the scale was unmistakable. Massive, organic structures were growing in orbit around the crystal being's homeworld, fed by the processed remains of the planet's population. It's a breeding facility, whispered Dr. Wright, his voice filled with horror. The Queen Mind is preparing to create a new generation of Vorthok warriors. If that facility comes online, she'll be able to produce ships faster than we can destroy them. Admiral Sullivan stared at the display, calculating distances and response times. Zarian was 6 days away at maximum speed, and the human fleet was already stretched thin across multiple battle zones. Direct assault would require pulling ships from defensive positions, leaving other worlds vulnerable. Admiral, said Captain Mitchell's voice over the intercom, request permission to take a small strike force to Zarian. If we can get close enough, we might be able to disrupt their construction before it's completed. It would be a suicide mission, Sullivan replied. Those breeding facilities will be heavily defended, maybe, Mitchell acknowledged. But if we don't try, every species in the galaxy becomes extinct. It's not acceptable odds. Sullivan looked around the command center at her exhausted staff, then at Ambassador Kethra's frightened face. The alien diplomat was beginning to understand the terrible mathematics of warfare. Sometimes the only choice was between bad options and worse ones. Permission granted, Sullivan said quietly. Take whatever ships and crew you need. We'll cover your approach as long as possible. Captain Zoe Mitchell stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance as her strike force dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zarian system. What she saw through the viewport made her breath catch in her throat. The Vorthok breeding facility was even larger than their long-range sensors had indicated. Stretching across thousands of kilometers of space like a living city. My God, whispered her tactical officer, Commander Steve Taylor. It's beautiful and horrible at the same time. The facility pulsed with organic rhythms, its biomechanical structures growing visibly as they watched. Streams of processed material flowed through transparent tubes the size of subway tunnels, feeding the construction of new Vorthok bioships. Already, dozens of freshly grown vessels were detaching from the facility's berthing chambers. Captain, reported Chief Engineer Linda Murphy, I'm detecting massive quantum entanglement networks throughout that structure. The complexity is beyond anything we've seen before. Zoe studied the tactical display, showing her small fleet of 12 ships, facing defensive forces that outnumbered them 20-1. Behind her, the rest of the human fleet was spread across 7 star systems, holding the line against Vorthok attacks while she tried to complete this impossible mission. All ships. This is Captain Mitchell, she announced over the fleet channel. You all volunteered for this, knowing the odds. Our job is to get close enough to that facility to disrupt its construction. If we fail here, the war is over. The assault began with a coordinated missile barrage from the human ships. Nuclear warheads streaked across space toward the massive facility, followed by kinetic penetrators designed to punch deep into organic structures. The Vorthok defenders responded immediately, their bioships moving in perfect coordination to intercept the incoming weapons. They're adapting to our attack. Patterns faster than before, observed Lieutenant Amy Johnson from her sensor station. It's like the Queen Mind is learning from every battle we've fought. The human ships pushed deeper into the system, fighting through waves of Vorthok defenders. Captain Jake Morrison's Defiant took heavy damage while covering the assault forces. Advance, its hull scarred by biomechanical weapons that ate through metal like acid. Marine General Chris Baker's transport ships launched fighter squadrons that engaged the smaller Vorthok units in desperate dogfights. As they drew closer to the breeding facility, the true scale of the enemy's preparation became clear. The structure wasn't just building new ships, it was evolving them, creating Vorthok biovessels specifically designed to counter human tactics. The newest craft emerging from the birthing chambers had thick armor against kinetic weapons and energy. Dissipation systems to handle nuclear explosions. Captain called Dr. Paul Jenkins, the fleet's xenopsychologist. I'm detecting something unusual in the quantum entanglement patterns. There are individual nodes scattered throughout the facility that don't match the hive mind signatures. What does that mean? Zoe asked, maneuvering her ship through a field of defensive fire. I think there are independent Vorthok units inside that structure. Beings who have been cut off from the Queen Mind's control somehow. The battle reached its climax when the human strike force penetrated the facility's outer defenses. Instead of the coordinated response they expected, some sections of the massive structure began firing on others. Internal conflicts erupted as different parts of the biomechanical city fought against each other. There are definitely free Vorthok in there, Dr. Jenkins reported excitedly. They're trying to sabotage the facility from within. Chief Engineer Murphy made a discovery that changed everything. Captain, I've isolated the main quantum entanglement hub. It's at the center of the facility, but the approach is heavily defended. If we can disrupt that hub, we might be able to sever the Queen Mind's control over the entire structure. Zoe looked at her tactical display, calculating the odds. A direct assault on the central hub would require her ship to penetrate deep into the facility's core. Through kilometers of biomechanical corridors filled with defensive systems, it was essentially a suicide mission. All ships, continue the external attack, she ordered. Vengeance will attempt to reach the central hub. If we don't make it out, complete the mission by any means necessary. The Vengeance entered the facility through a massive breach torn in its outer hull. Zoe and her crew found themselves flying through corridors that looked more like the inside of a living creature than a space station. The walls pulsed with organic rhythms, and biomechanical defenses tracked their movement through the complex structure. Captain called Dr. Jenkins from his station. I'm picking up communication attempts from multiple sources inside the facility. I think the free Vorthok units are trying to contact us. Put them through, Zoe ordered. The main screen flickered and showed the interior of what looked like a Vorthok command center. But instead of the mindless drones they had fought throughout the war, these creatures moved with individual purpose. One stepped forward, its biomechanical form scarred from internal battles. Human vessel, it said in halting English, that had clearly been learned rather than programmed. I am called 7 by your designation systems. We are Vorthok who have broken free from the Queen Mind's control. How many of you are there? Zoe asked. Thousands in this facility alone, 7 replied. Millions throughout the Empire who retain fragments of individual thought. We have been waiting for an opportunity to act against the Queen Mind's tyranny. The implications hit Zoe immediately. The war wasn't just about stopping the Vorthok expansion. It was about liberating an entire enslaved species from their own biological programming. Can you help us reach the central hub? She asked. Yes, 7 confirmed. But you must understand. Destroying the hub will not kill the Queen Mind. It will only free us from her control. She exists in the core systems of the homeworld, far from here. Vengeance, guided by 7 and his rebel Vorthok units, fought its way through the facility's defenses toward the central quantum hub. The journey took them through sections where freed Vorthok were already fighting their enslaved kin. biological civil war raging in the corridors of the massive structure. When they finally reached the hub, Zoe found herself facing a choice that would define humanity's role in galactic civilization. The central chamber contained not just the quantum entanglement systems, but thousands of Vorthok units in various stages of development. Destroying the hub would free the enslaved beings, but it would also kill those who weren't yet mature enough to survive independently. "Captain," urged Commander Taylor, "we need to move now. The facility's defenses are converging on our position." Zoe stared at the chamber full of developing Vorthok, thinking about everything her species had learned during this war. Humans had proven they could be the galaxy's most effective killers. Well, they had a chance to prove they could also be its most effective protectors. "Dr. Jenkins, can you modify our biodisruption field to sever the Queen Mind's control without destroying the developing units?" "It's possible," he replied, working frantically at his console, "but it will take time we don't have." Day 7. Zoe called to their Vorthok ally. "Can your people hold the defenses long enough for us to complete the modification?" "We will try," Seven replied, "but many of us will die in the attempt." "Then we'd better make it count," Zoe said grimly. The final battle raged throughout the facility as freed Vorthok fought their enslaved brethren, while human engineers worked to modify their weapon systems. When the biodisruption field finally activated, the effect was immediate and dramatic. Across the massive structure, enslaved Vorthok suddenly stopped their coordinated movements as individual consciousness returned to them. The breeding facility went silent except for the confused voices of newly freed beings trying to understand their situation. The war was far from over, but for the first time, the Vorthok had allies among their own kind. "Seven," Zoe said, as her ship prepared to evacuate the facility, "what will your people do now?" "We will fight beside you," the freed Vorthok replied. "The Queen Mind has enslaved us for 10,000 years. It is time for that tyranny to end." 6 months later, Admiral Jake Morrison stood in the observation deck of the new space station, Unity, watching human children play with young aliens from a dozen different species. The war against the Vorthok Queen Mind continued, but now it was fought with Vorthok allies, who understood the enemy better than anyone. The Galactic Council had established the new compact, an alliance that included humanity as its military protectors, and the freed Vorthok as its redemption specialists. Ambassador Kethra, now a close friend and ally, often remarked that humans had taught the galaxy something profound about strength. "True power," she had said during the signing ceremony, "is not the ability to destroy your enemies. It is the wisdom to know when mercy is stronger than violence." Morrison smiled as he watched a human child teach a young Vorthok how to throw a ball. The galaxy had learned that Deathworlders don't just know how to fight, they know when not to.